Hello, my name's Andy, I'm a Ginger Gamer, welcome to episode 13. Right, as you can see, I'm at the Prehistoric Kingdom load game. This is my Prehistoric calendar save. As you can see, I've done about 220 hours, which is quite a lot. It's not quite up there with my Prehistoric City one, which is about 304 hours. But it's still quite a lot of time, and I've still got a fair amount of work to go. It's getting there, but there's quite a lot of work. Anyway, let's load it up. Now, I do like the Prehistoric Kingdom load screens. I know it's just a T-Rex walking in silhouette, but I do like it, and I like all the little text that comes up. I think there's a lot of added value in this game. Not least of all the camera mode and things like that, and for an early access game I think there's such a lot of really good touches in the game that I like. Now this is taking quite a long time to load, as you would imagine, because there's quite a lot in the map. Nowhere near the Prehistoric City map load time, which you could go away and make a cup of tea and watch something on telly and come back before it has finished loading. But it still takes quite a long time, and I shall probably speed it up for you rather than make you sit and watch this. Right, here we are. I will put a little graphic up in the corner to say exactly how long it took to load, because I think, well, I find it interesting. Anyway, I've got up to a fair amount since episode 12, one of which is this enclosure here, which we'll come back to, because I want to start with the first thing I did, which is all the way down the hill and back to the start of the park. I will change that to a nice sunny day because it's easier to see everything. Right down here, because I have made the arrival area, which I'm quite pleased with. The first building is this building. Now, all the buildings in the game and lots of the locations in the game are based on source photos from areas in Canada, hence why it's called Prehistoric Canada. And this building is based on a real life building. I won't say which one because it's obviously very different, and I don't want it to look bad in comparison. But I think I've done a reasonable job. I think it looks quite nice. Obviously it houses the visitor arrival module, which goes in this area of the building. It's not in there at the moment. At the end of this video I will put it in and let the guests run free, as it were, and you can see how they get on navigating the map for a little bit anyway. So the conceit for this is that guests arrive down this river, and the boat docks here. They disembark and enter the arrivals building here, and then they exit that out of these two steps here on the right. This one is for guests to exit, and as you can see, there's a path that's a placeholder path that will capture the guests as they come down off the hill on the final few enclosures and exit the park. Anyway, in this arrival area, it's a little bit hokey. I've got 4 lodges, quite large lodges, and I'm really quite pleased with myself. I've got to admit, all modesty aside, I think these look really good. I think they look quite good at night. Hold on a second. That looks quite good as well. So I'm quite pleased with these. These are some of the best buildings I've made, I think. And yeah, and these are for places for probably the richer guests who want to make a weekend of visiting the park that can actually stay in, and they a couple back onto the river and some back onto the hillside, which isn't so desirable, I guess. There's also, as you can see, a decorative lake or pond, and then we get to this next building, which is the main entrance building of the site, and this building kind of blocks this arrival area from the first exhibit, which, if you followed the channel, you might know is Triceratops. So anyway, in this arrivals building, there's a cafe, toilets, clothes shop, and then there's arrivals building where people enter and then exit round the back and make their way around the park. Now, as you will see when I release guests, that sounds a terrible thing to say. When guests are navigating the park, there are some problem areas where guests will bunch up. This is one round here, and there's one at the back there, and there's one further on in the park. I'm not sure how much of that is to do with the design of the park and how much that's to do with some of the AI pathfinding issues that guests have at the moment. But we'll see. I guess when that starts to be worked on and improved, I think there's probably some issues in the layout of the park as well. Anyway, so that's the first update to show you. The next one is the next animal enclosure. Now, in episode 12, I think I left you with the Smilodons. I think that was the last one I did. Yeah. And the next next enclosure I've made is for the mammoths. Now, on the face of it, it looks kind of a relatively sort of boring open space, but I think there's some nice bits in it. So one is a quite large lake, and I wanted a more abstract lake rather than just kind of like a round pond, and I think that looks quite good. And there's also a shallow area and then this muddy area, which I seem to be putting in all of my enclosures now, but elephants certainly like that in real life. So I'm assuming mammoths, especially mammoths who are living in maybe a warmer climate than they're used to, might appreciate. In terms of the guests, they've got this walkway over here that runs along the fence here. And so for the whole length of that, as they walk round, they've got an unobstructed view of the mammoths. And then this part, let me just get into a good position so you can see, it's kind of based on old-fashioned zoos that would have elephants, especially in these kind of enclosures, and then have a moat in between the guests and the elephants. So again, it looks like there's no fence, and I suppose technically there isn't a fence, but you've got a really good view. Now, I think humans could climb that easier than the elephants could. And there's a moat, and I quite like that. I think that worked quite well. As you can see, I've done a lot of ground planting and tried to mix up textures, because I think everything does look a bit better and a bit more realistic the more ground planting you do and the more mixture of textures you do. Because partly because the grass I'm not that keen on, but I don't think in most wildlife places the ground is uniform, so it will always look better the more you add to it. That mammoth wants to fall in the pond. Anyway, the next bit I did, this is a little bit hokey, but I put some trees that have no sort of leaves on, and then some trunks, and then some trunks with stripped out branches, and then some tree stumps. And the conceit to this is something mammoths do to the trees, a bit like elephants do in the wild. And the last area is just a little sleeping area, which of course they don't use as of yet, but should be doing in the future. Right, so you exit away from here to the next exhibit by the ubiquitous steps up that hillside, and then this area is empty and not finished yet, so I'm thinking here of putting maybe some seats and maybe a little drinks machine or something like that, just for guests to get some refreshment. And then this next exhibit is for the woolly mammoths. The woolly rhinos. Now, I was thinking long and hard about what kind of environment to put the woolly rhinos, and I do think sometimes they're kind of stuck in with the mammoths, and I wanted to give them an environment of their own, and I wanted to give them quite a large, quite a nice environment really. And I had kind of two ideas unconnected with the rhinos, and that was one, I wanted to have a nice really sort of narrow stream that you might find in a Canadian forest there, and I also wanted to have a lower walkway, but obviously a low walkway would mean a smaller animal and also an animal that couldn't jump, which kind of narrowed the list down to not very many. And I went with the woolly rhinos, who I think look really good. Now, I'm quite pleased with this stream. I think it looks quite good. The walkway looks really good, but that's really a modular piece I've made, which has just got this support strut and that, and it's just a question of copying and pasting and fitting them into the roots. That's quite easy to do. But this, I spent quite a long time, as you can imagine, getting that stream and the ground plants around it and the tree trunks and branches and stuff right. But I am pretty pleased with it. And then again, lots of ground planting because it looks good, and it also gives places for them to forage and sleep in, because they don't sleep in their nest. I think I've made them a nest. Yeah, I've made them a sort of a bedding area over here. They very often fall asleep in their food, and lots of the animals seem to do that. Seem to sort of lie down by the food and fall asleep, or lie down by the water. Now, in the last episode, I was talking about the smilodons and then walking across bridges and how difficult it was to get them to do it. So I put in this area here for them to be able to walk across this stream, and they do it really, really easily. And they use that fine. But what you might have just seen then is they also just walk straight across the stream, even though in some places, not in this place, some places the stream is quite deep. They will just walk straight across it. So I'm not sure how that works, but yeah, it does work somehow. So that's the woolly rhinos, and that's the exhibit, and this is how you exit as a guest. You exit the exhibit, and again, I'm probably going to have a little kind of rush stop area there, and then more stairs down here, and then another enclosure, and then more down here, more down there, work my way around there, down again, and then back to the arrival centre where guests can exit. So I think that's probably, oh, there's an escape dino. The dinos escape all the time. I don't know if you find this, but they don't half escape a lot. Now, where did the iguanas go? Iguanodons. Yeah, right. What was I going to say? So yes, I don't know exactly which dinos I'm going to put in these last 4 or 5 or 6 enclosures. What I do know is I'm definitely going to make a Velociraptor one. The new update, which should have the Velociraptors in, is due out before the end of the month, and as I record this on the 21st, that's only, a week and a half away, and there's no way I'll finish the park, so I'll definitely be able to include Velociraptors in it. And I do want to have another T-Rex one, because I love T-Rex, they're my favourite dinos. But I want to have one that's just got one T-Rex, and the conceit would be that it's kind of a rogue T-Rex that couldn't live over here where the other T-Rexes live in this big enclosure here. Has to live on its own. Kind of the conceit again would be sort of like the Indominus Rex in Jurassic World. It was a bit of a mean one. Maybe make it a little bit more of a foreboding enclosure. That's kind of my plan anyway. Right, let's go back to this and let's set some guests free. So, put the module... Oh, didn't mean to do that. Right, need to put the guest's arrival module in here. Now you notice I've got a couple of place markers, and that's just to make sure that I get the module in the right place, because if it's not exactly in the right place, the guests will kind of get stuck in the floor and get trapped and not exit the building and all sorts of problems. Right, so I need to make it the right height and then just position it correctly in the corner, which is sometimes not as easy as it should be. Right, there we go. And there's the guests. And if we come out of here, they should be exiting the building relatively quickly. Yeah, if you get it in the right place, they come through quite quickly. They do mingle around in lots of places. So as I was saying, yeah, sometimes there's kind of spots where they will just seem to get trapped and go in circles and bunch up. One of them's here, which I kind of solved by adding another path, which seems to work. But yeah, let's let them roam free for a while. The dinosaur pathfinding and AI is much better, but that makes sense. I mean, I think I get up to about 13 when I've left this running for like 40 minutes or so. I get a sort of 1,300 guests, so I can imagine that's like quite some complicated AI to get working properly. But yeah, they find their way around and then they make their way around to here. Now, one of the problems here is ideally there'd be two ways for them to enter the park. Through this kind of main entrance place here, through this path, and then round there and along that path. Or through the cafe, through that path and up and around there. But they just don't use this in any numbers at all. And they tend to just come out of this entrance place here and then they'll bunch up here. But they do find their way down here eventually. And they do tend to bunch up a little bit around here. And then we get to the steps, which I'll talk about in a minute. Once the guests are on their way, it does take them a few minutes before they really, yeah, you see they're bunching there already. So I will add that path. And that, for some reason, that seems to do the trick. I think guests, it seems to be the AI for guests is always about looking for the shortest route, not necessarily the next interesting thing. They're not really that sort of geared up at going to places of interest. It seems like it's just, what's the shortest route to the next point? They don't really explore. So occasionally some of them will go off in the lodge and they'll walk up there and walk back round again, but not very often. I don't really want them doing that, to be fair, but they don't really do that. I think I've temporarily solved that bunch, although they'll start a new one. I need to clear these plants really, I guess. But anyway, and then they start to go in there, and then most of them do work out that they need to go around this little building, and then they come out there, and to begin with it works quite well, and they seem to be finding their way. And they follow down this path. And eventually they'll enter the park proper. It will be good when they start to kind of pause at places to actually look at the animals. That would be quite good. But, you know, it takes time. Yeah, I think I've kind of solved that bunching problem to a degree, but they do kind of do a lot of circling back and turning round, so I'm not quite sure why they do it. And this is when they start to bunch and do that kind of circling motion. They do something else really strange as well, which I will show you if they start doing it. It's quite weird. Now the steps are interesting with the guests in that sometimes they'll walk up them absolutely fine all the way to the top, and then sometimes they'll drop through the floor. Sometimes they'll just glitch out of existence. But it's really inconsistent. It's not if they're kind of bunching up in a crowd. It's not if, I don't know, they take it at the wrong angle or something. So I'm not really sure why they do it. I've made sure, I think it's on this one or maybe the next one, that there's no gaps at all, and there aren't any gaps, and then they'll still drop through the floor. I did think about making these wood pieces thicker, and maybe that would stop it, or even doubling them up, but I'm not sure. Let's see how this person gets on. I mean, sometimes they'll just make it no problems. I'm not. And there's no particular point. It's like the same point that they'll drop through the floor or glitch out. It does seem to be making it okay. Although often you'll get a forced dawn and they'll get up to about here and then drop through the floor, which isn't ideal, especially when it's above a dinosaur enclosure. So yeah, this one they tends to be one that they get up more consistently, and then then they're back to a path and they can find their way. And then they tend to find their way down here fine. They don't stop to use any of that. Sometimes they'll get to here, turn around and come back, and then sometimes they'll go down these steps. Okay, they don't tend to glitch out of this one and then work their way around there and then follow this path, and they'll follow this path all the way around until they get to here, and then they might go right here and go to this cafe and stare at nothingness and then come out again, or they'll go up these steps, and these are the real problem steps in the whole level really so far. Is I've only had one guest get up to the top, and then they walked around here, and then they got to about here, and then they turned around and went back. Now I don't know if it's because it's so far without a proper path, and if maybe I just did a short bit of path here before we got to more raised, what is basically a raised floor here, maybe that would help and they'd find their way to there. But we'll see. I'm not sure how much of the problems guests have with my park are down to my park, the design and the layout, or down to the pathfinding of the guest's AI. But yeah, they're starting their bunching up. Oh yeah, this is what they do. They jump up on the roof, and I have no idea. This isn't a floor piece. This is a roof piece, but they will jump up onto the roof, which is funny, but not entirely realistic. So yeah, I'm not sure how much is it down to the air or the park layout. See, why don't you stop and have a look? There's Triceratops. But yeah, we may find out. It may get done before I finish this park. If not, when I make the park tour, I may have to cheat a little bit. So I may have to put more arrival modules further around the park to view guests accessing all of the park. I think that's probably something I'll have to do, just to kind of cheat things a little bit. But anyway, on that note, and with guests somewhat enjoying my park, I will leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed this. There's lots still to come. I've got two ideas for my next park. One is a very traditional, almost a city zoo kind of park, and the other is a more concept kind of idea, which wouldn't be a traditional park or an actual park in any way, but is a really interesting idea in my opinion anyway. But we'll see. I've got lots of time to think about it. But yeah, thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.